What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. It's good to be back. I was gone last week. Now I'm here. We'll talk a little bit about that. But really, today, we're going to talk about The War of the Worlds, which is a movie with Ice Cube that just came out. And it was actually, they had one in 2005 with Tom Cruise. But actually, both are sort of based on the book in 1895 by H.G. Wells. But really, what I want to talk about is the real War of the Worlds happening right now, the genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. And I've been thinking a lot about that lately, and so I want to just talk about some of my thoughts on this podcast episode today, some of what I'm feeling. And if you want to read and listen or read some of my thoughts that are more concise and well thought out and written out, go check out my Substack, because I've been writing more on that lately. So I just put one out just barely right now, and it's getting good. I like writing on Substack. It feels good to be writing on there again, but I also just wrote a book. Link in description. I got to get all my plugs out of the way, people. Link in the description for the book I just wrote called You Don't Need a Calling, an Anti-Capitalist Manifesto for a Life of Purpose. And it comes out in June, but you can pre-order right now, and pre-orders help. So go do that. I like writing. I like talking. That's why also I have a podcast. And let's get right into it. After you made sure to go subscribe to the Substack and pre-order that book. I know you did. You good? Okay, cool. Now let's get back to this. The podcast, perhaps. War of the World. So, yeah, I was gone last week. It felt weird. But really, I was not feeling great. I was thinking about preparing an episode, and I just didn't do it because I didn't feel good. And now I'm feeling better. But really, what's going on is I've been going through this transition phase after finishing that book, after putting so much time and energy into that over the last 3 years. Now I feel like I'm coming back to a different groove of life. It reminds me of how some of my friends talk about coming back from college or finishing like a master's degree. I don't have a degree in anything. I did a little bit of like community college and some Bible college, and I went away for a 2-year church internship ministry thing at one point, and then came back to my hometown. But I hear some of my friends talk about how like doing like people did a master's in divinity and stuff like that, doing that kind of stuff, spending so long learning and reading and writing because they have to. Afterward, it takes them a long time to get back into learning and reading because they actually want to learn and read because they're just so burnt out. And I resonate with that right now because it's really been over the last 5 years that I've been kind of burning out on reading and learning and researching things, because I got a book deal for the first book, The God Who Riots, which is out right now, came out in 2022. I got that at the end of 2020. And then right after that book, I had an idea for a second book, and I just went right into preparing a second book. And over the last 5 years, most of my learning and reading and researching energy has gone to just trying to learn things for those books. And every now and then I would have some left to make videos or post articles here and there. But really reading and learning and stuff has just been felt like exhausting, overwhelming. And so now I feel like I'm slowly moving into this different approach where I'm learning just to learn, reading just to read, and it feels good. And with that, I was reading a lot about Gaza the last 2 weeks, and it's been heavy. And also reading a lot about the mass deportations and the protests against ICE and the evangelical nonsense who are now empowered by the Trump administration to pass policies that will further harm us in the name of Christian nationalism. There's a lot going on. And over the last few years, I've been able to read articles here and there, but now I feel like I'm able to go deeper on all this stuff, and I don't have a book to distract me from these feelings. Because that was the other thing. I was keeping up with this stuff, and then I would just go to the book and just read something for the book and be able to escape in that little world. And I wrote about some of this stuff in the book too, you'll see eventually, but there's a lot of other stuff I wrote about in the book. But yeah, it got me thinking a lot and struggling to have hope right now, as the IDF is fully occupying West Bank right now, moving into Gaza, and that, like, imagining it from that geographic perspective of over time since 1948, the occupation of Israel, Israel's occupation of Palestine, I'm sure you've seen those images of how much Palestine covered of the map, and as it's slowly gotten smaller and smaller and smaller, now it's just this little strip of land, and now that is about to go away too. And it's horrifying. And people are seeing it. People who've refused to see it are seeing it now because of all the reports of starvation and evidence of starvation and the refusal of Israel to allow in aid. And when they actually go to get aid from the UN or from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, it's just been a place where people just get killed. Even reading a bit about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, this is something I just learned. I didn't know anything about them until the last couple of weeks. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is actually led by Israel and the United States, and there originally was 400 sites for receiving aid, and now has gone down to 4. And the leader of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is this American evangelical guy named Johnny Moore, who is a graduate from Liberty University, and after that started a PR agency. And that's really where his experience is, and PR. And he's traveled all over the world talking to all these diplomats and world leaders and religious leaders, and tried to fight for religious tolerance, but in kind of a strange way, and is extremely Zionist and extremely evangelical. And this guy, has no experience in humanitarian work. And then when you see what he's doing, you start to see why they hired this guy. What he's really doing right now is just going on media tours to say, actually, no, starvation isn't really happening in Gaza. It's actually not that bad. And actually, no, they're not shooting people as they come and get aid. But actually, it sort of is happening, but it's mostly just with the UN's sites. And not for us, no way. Also, pushing the lie about Hamas stealing food, which is what Netanyahu said. Netanyahu said that on the Nelk Boys podcast. The YouTube prankster dudes did a podcast that Netanyahu on, and they asked about starvation. He's like, oh, well, no, it's not really happening. And we try to bring in aid, but Hamas steals the food. No, that doesn't happen. The Israeli military officials ended up denying that there's actual systematic stealing. And it's just, so you think about hiring a PR guy, a PR evangelical Zionist guy for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And on the surface, it's, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, who's leading these food distribution sites. Sounds like a good thing, right? But it's all just a front. It's just to say, look, we care about Gaza. We're giving them food. But really, we've reduced the sites down to just 4. Where people have to walk miles and miles to get to through violent war. And then once they get there, they end up getting shot. And then our leader is saying, no, it's not happening. It's like you start to understand why they hired a PR guy for that role. And that stuff will really make you doomer out. And then reading about the Israeli support for all this. Because there are a lot of Israelis who are calling for a ceasefire. But with that question, you kind of have to understand people's different reasoning for wanting a ceasefire. Because there's Israelis who are very much against Netanyahu and the Israeli government and the genocide against Palestinians, and have been against it since way before October 7th and have been calling for a ceasefire. And then there's Israelis who are calling for a ceasefire from the perspective of, hey, Hamas needs to stop, and we need our hostages back, and we need to bring our troops back home. So Hamas, stop. It's not, hey, Israeli government, stop killing tens of thousands of people. It's a different perspective of wanting to stop the whole thing. And so a survey from the Israeli Democracy Institute that came out on August 5th said 79% of Israeli Jews did not feel personally troubled by the reports of famine and suffering among the Palestinian population in Gaza. Like that's how they asked them that question. Do you feel personally troubled? 79% said no. And another survey found that 47% of all Israelis felt that reports of starvation were probably lies and made up. And another 18% said, even if it is true, I'm not bothered by it. That's horrifying to read. Meanwhile, you have a lot of people and politicians who have supported Israel in the past are now starting to change their tune because it's just becoming more and more undeniable, the violence and genocide and ethnic cleansing that's happening right now. And so it's just lies on lies on lies. Denial. But I think what we're actually seeing is I think it's too easy to just paint Israelis as cartoonishly evil. I'm talking about like the citizens who are surveyed here. And I think we have to remember that Israelis are constantly inundated with media that's still talking about October 7th and still making everything about the hostages and about the lives lost on October 7th. And that has remained the narrative. The rest of the world is looking at everything that's happened after October 7th, and the people really paying attention are looking at everything that happened before October 7th that led to that since the Israeli occupation in 1948. And the Israelis who are, and even like other people around the world who support Israel, who are just engaging with the media that makes everything about October 7th, feel like the world is ignoring the real issue. A lot of Israelis feel like the world has forgotten about October 7th and the world has forgotten about them, and that the world just hates Jewish people, and the UN is unfairly critical of Israel because they're anti-Semitic, and really that the world just doesn't understand what they went through on October 7th, and that we've all just fallen for Hamas propaganda. And what's tough with that perspective is that the more people try to say, look at all this other stuff, look at the suffering of Palestinians, look at the history here, look at what's happening, look at starvation happening right now, look at bombing happening right now, look at all these deaths happening right now. The more people do that, I think there's a lot of people who that empowers them to just sink even further to this narrative that all that matters is October 7th, out of trauma and very emotionally driven arguments. And they just go even further and feel, oh, look, more evidence that you guys just forgot about us. More evidence that you guys just hate Jewish people. You guys just ignore Israel's suffering. You guys just have fallen for propaganda. And it's not just by saying, look at the suffering over here. And some people have had conversations about this and said that, well, it's important to acknowledge both suffering. But even then, it's not enough for so many Zionists. And really, I'm just thinking out loud. And I don't know the solution to this at all. Because the truth is, the world hasn't forgotten about October 7th. They just don't think that is enough to justify genocide. That's all. That's it. It's not anti-Semitic. It's just like, you guys don't get to do a genocide. Simple. And I think there's a lot of people who just that's their perspective. We just don't want you doing a genocide. And they don't even know the whole history of it all. And that's becoming like the normie perspective of people who don't know anything about the conflict over there and everything that Palestine has gone through, and don't even realize that the Israeli state was established in 1948. They just are like, yeah, genocide bad. Yes, we remember October 7th. Doesn't justify this. And so as the world makes that shift more and more and more gradually, I don't know if that's going to lead to Israeli Zionists or Zionists around the world actually changing their mind. And at this point, I don't know what can make them change their mind. And that's the weird thing. It's not like showing them more, because it's like you show them more, I think out of a trauma response, they just sink even further to their perspective and refuse to listen. And honestly, it kind of reminds me of the way that people talked in the United States after 9/11, where that whole thing did not start on 9/11. That attack was in response to United States occupation in the Middle East for decades. And afterward, it didn't justify everything the United States did in Afghanistan and Iraq and all the people that American soldiers killed and the occupation going on to this day. And yet, when you try to talk to people to get them to understand that larger perspective, they would just get stuck on 9/11. To this day, there's people who still think like that. If you try to challenge that narrative, because the big American propaganda narrative is that Muslims all over the Middle East just hate Americans and want to kill all Americans because they hate freedom. And so when you try to challenge that and say, well, actually, it's a bit different. Here's some of the things that the American military has done in the past. Here's what they did after 9/11. Here's some of the things that people all across the Middle East are responding to when they criticize the United States. Here's why a lot of places in the world see the United States as a bad guy. Just starting that conversation, people would shut you down and just go back to 9/11 and just be like, you're terrible. How could you say that? How the troops are heroes and all these terrorists are monsters and savages who just hate our freedom. And they get so emotional. And today, we're seeing Israelis say, oh yeah, Palestinians just want to kill all Jews because they hate our freedom. Just a weird, cartoonish propaganda that totally dehumanizes people. And I remember a few years ago, I was eating at a restaurant with some friends, and we're talking about movies, and somehow we ended up talking about the movie American Sniper, and that movie about the sniper Chris Kyle who was watching the news, saw 9/11, was like, I got to do something about this, and then joined the military and became a sniper for the military and killed so many people, and just awful person. And I think a lot of people understood how ridiculous of propaganda that movie was. And so we brought up randomly that movie. I started saying a little shtick of, oh yeah, that movie's such propaganda. I can't believe it, blah, blah, blah. And this guy a few tables over overhears me talking, this young white guy, and he was eating with somebody, and he interrupted me and just started telling me off for criticizing the American military. And he was like, why don't you go over there, huh? And just, I don't remember everything he said. That's the only line I remember. Why don't you go over there? And then we went back and forth. I think just like 3 things back and forth. It was very quick, but very angry. He was very emotional. I could tell, like, very, very emotional. And it got shut down pretty quickly. I forget how it even ended, but we then went back to eating, and I felt very awkward, and it was hard for me to eat after having a confrontation like that, but I was able to eat. But I could tell out of the corner of my eye that this guy couldn't eat, and he was just still so frustrated. And then about a minute later, he just stood up and walked out. And I could tell it was just because he just completely lost his appetite and couldn't eat and was just too upset. But thinking back at that, of like, that was so emotional. Like, what is that? That wasn't just a normal, logical exchange of ideas. That wasn't just, hey, here's my opinion, or hey, what do you think about this? Or actually, I think you should think about this. It was an emotional outburst. And any argument we could have had wouldn't have done anything. It just felt like he was just so stuck in this very emotional view informed by American propaganda. And I think there's a lot of, people who are around after 9/11 remember a lot of people being like that. But I was a little kid, and I remember that vibe. How old was I? What is it, 8 years old when 9/11 happened? Yeah. But to this day, there's people still stuck in that. And so, again, I think about, I don't know what to do with that. Like, these people need healing. Like, there's all this personal stuff going deep down. All this trauma, all these emotions, all this suppression, all this projection. And having a conversation about what's going on, it doesn't, I don't know. Well, arguments, first of all, definitely don't work for that condition. But even maybe a conversation would work. I just don't know what the hell that conversation would look like. Maybe Gabor Mate knows that psychologist dude. I don't know. It's somebody knows. I'm sure somebody has written about this, right? Somebody has to have written about how to have conversations with people who are in that kind of condition. I don't know. But I guess my main point is, it's not easy. It's not simple. And it's not just about showing them more information. And it's not just about making better arguments. And it's not even just about acknowledging the suffering they want you to acknowledge first, or condemning Hamas first, and then that's all BS. That's all just weird propaganda games to control people's thinking. And it's not, I don't know how to get through. But I also don't really think about this that much, because I'm lucky, my personal life, I don't know anybody who supports Israel. And so I've never had to like think through this. So now I'm thinking through, it's like I would see them randomly in a comment section on social media and see the way they argue. And I've seen videos of like some debates that people try to have, but I've never had to sit down and have this conversation. And so I have ignorance there as well. But I don't know. And part of my work these days that I think about a lot is I want to try to help people stretch their imagination around politics and spirituality and culture, history, the future. And I feel like there is a severe lack of imagination on this issue. But I'm still learning. I'm still learning how to expand my own imagination, how to help others. But part of that work, I think, is also healing the imagination. I think that part is very necessary because our imaginations have been stolen and hijacked and shaped by the powers that be for their own purposes. And they take advantage of people's trauma and then aim it at their enemy and make people feel like the enemy, whoever the government has made an enemy of, is now your personal enemy. And it's monstrous to do that to people. And so, that's a whole real psychological soul healing that needs to happen for people to be rescued from that kind of manipulation. It's a lot of work that needs to be done. I'm still learning how to do that. And War of the Worlds came out. War of the Worlds. The connection here is the 2005 movie with Tom Cruise was inspired by the vibes of post 9/11. And here's what's so interesting. So we'll connect it all. We'll connect it all together. Don't worry, people. This isn't too much of a tangent. But let me explain War of the Worlds real quick. I just found this out because, everyone's dunking on the new War of the Worlds 2025. Some of you may not even know when this came out. Some of you may have just seen random clips of Ice Cube yelling at the camera lens like he's looking at a computer screen. Like one that's going around is him just yelling, saying, "It was you! It was you! I can't believe it was you!" And this is from a new movie released on Amazon, called War of the Worlds, which is kind of based on the book, but not really. And it's a screen life movie is what they call this genre now. I just found out they have a name for that genre, where the whole movie is on the computer screen. So the whole movie you're seeing Ice Cube, his face looking at the computer screen, and his computer screen, who is an NSA agent spying on people for the government. And he's just doing his job, spying on people, making sure to protect Americans from terrorist threats. And as this movie's starting, and before the alien invasion, I'm like, this is such a bad time to release a movie where the hero is an NSA agent spying on people. And even the beginning, it shows he has a adult son and daughter, and he's spying on them, using cameras all over the city to spy on them and just to check up on them. And he'll see them buy some food that his pregnant daughter maybe shouldn't buy, immediately calls her like, "I see you in that coffee shop." That's not good for the baby. It's, oh my God. Okay. I don't want to go too deep on this. There's so much, but anyway, then the aliens come, and he's talking to his NASA homie and getting updates, and he saves the world through his computer screen. But I found out that Oh yeah, and then he ends up, part of the plot is him realizing that the reason the aliens came is because the US government started this program to spy on everybody, collect everyone's data and spy on all of them. This huge project called Goliath. Also, the main character's name is David. Wink, wink. And and he doesn't believe it at first. He thinks it's just rumors, but then he finds out it's true. My own government that I work for lied to me to my face. And that's why the aliens are here. And they feed off data. And so we're going to put in this hack to make it work against them and hack into the aliens, and then they die. And then he's at the end, he's like, I'm done. Spying on people is wrong, actually. I'm going to be watching you guys now, NSA. And anyway, I just found out the book was initially... So, yeah, the book in England in the late 1800s, Martians come and they're big tripod machines and they're killing people. And then they end up dying because of bacteria that their bodies aren't acclimated for. And that's how it ends. And that's how the 2005 movie goes too, but it's set in 2005 United States. But I just found out that that book was a critique of British imperialism. Like, that was the subtle theme of it all, which is like showing, like, a way of saying, hey, England, look what happens when an outside force does to us what we Brits have been doing to other people. Isn't imperialism wrong? Isn't it messed up? Look how it feels. Like, that was the vibe of that book. And the 2005 movie kind of drifted from that. And I was reading about how some people were critiquing the 2005 movie. I didn't know, but I watched it as a little kid. I just thought it was cool, aliens and all that. But people critiqued it as like, this would have been the perfect opportunity in post 9/11 America, releasing this in 2005, to do the same thing and critique American imperialism. But they didn't do that. Steven Spielberg instead made a movie that just had a vibe of... It was similar, like 9/11 vibes. Even like as the aliens started coming, people kept saying, is it terrorists? Are there terrorists? And the same ending with the bacteria. And then they died, and that's how they got out. But it's still, I don't know, there's like subtle little things in there that could be sort of critiquing imperialism. Like, there's this one super throwaway line about this guy saying, like, I'm not gonna let them occupy this land. We know from history occupation never works. And then they just move on. So I think that was a little jab at imperialism. Also, like, there's people who are like, we got to fight them. We got to get them back, which is what a lot of people were saying after 9/11. And then it just doesn't work out for them. And so I think that's like a little subtle message of, hey guys, that this attempt at heroism maybe isn't the answer. But anyway, what was interesting was the 2025 version, which completely is so different from the book that it's hard to tell why they even called it War of the Worlds. But they kind of brought back some of that imperialism critique in a way. Because that subtle message was, y'all, we shouldn't be doing imperialism. Look what happens when an outside force gives us a taste of our own medicine. That was missing in the 2005 version. But heroism ended up winning in the 2025 version. In both the book and the 2005 movie, humans couldn't do anything. And the bacteria killed the aliens and they got lucky. in 2025, Ice Cube saved the day by doing this hack that I'm not. You might think I'm not explaining how the hack worked because I'm trying to avoid spoiling. I don't understand what it did. It was some weird thing that some experiment his daughter worked on with DNA to reverse cancer, I think. And they used the code for that into this data that the aliens were siphoning, and that ended up killing their cells, like the thing the daughter was working on would kill cancer cells, something like that. I don't know, but it was definitely like, booyah, humans, America, that's right, aliens, you can't mess with us. Which I feel like totally goes against that OG theme of the book. But anyway, I watched the 2025 movie, and then I rewatched the 2005 movie today just to get a feel of like what the differences were. And it just got me thinking a lot, even more about today's wars of the worlds. I just remembered in the 2025 movie, he's like, it is the president, because he gets on these calls with the president and these other government officials to make these big decisions, to do these things to try to combat the aliens. And one of those Zoom calls, the president is like, it is now a war of the worlds. And I just laugh now whenever I think of that. It's a war of the worlds. Roll credits. I think of the stuff actually going on. And then I see also that vibe captured again in that 2005 movie that I kind of forgot about, where people were so afraid of terrorists. I remember in 2003, at the beginning of 2003, so I was 10, people were still talking about 9/11 and terrorists all the time. And my uncle came over, and my uncle was talking to my mom about how he heard a rumor that the terrorists are going to come back on March 3rd, 2003, because it's 333. Maybe this was mixed in with some like end times propaganda too, because they like doing weird numerology as well. But he was like, they're coming back. It's happening. It's for sure happening. It's happening. And I was just overhearing bits of this, and I was terrified. And then I went to school, so I must have been in like third or fourth grade, and I started telling some of my friends, this is what I heard is going to happen on March 3rd. And then this girl overheard me and got me in trouble and told the teacher on me. And the teacher had a meeting with me. It was like, it was framed as like I'm spreading this fear mongering across the school campus that the terrorists are coming. And so the teacher looked like very disappointed in me. I felt like terrified, like I was in huge trouble because of the way that this girl framed it. And he said what this girl said, and it sounded way worse than what was actually going on. And I just told him, like, well, I heard my uncle say this, and I was just telling my friends. And I think he clarified that, oh, so you weren't like telling everybody? He's like, no, I was just telling a couple of my friends, and this girl overheard. And he's like, okay. And he let me off the hook. And I remember being super surprised that it let me off the hook, because I thought I was cooked. But looking back, I think it was just like, yeah, rumors on rumors. I get it, kid. Don't worry. This girl's just scared, like so many people are right now. Don't worry, kid. Oh, man. And so I saw a bit of that vibe in this War of the Worlds movie as well. And then, just think about, there's people still in that mindset. That super Islamophobic, super racist, and just still have this idea that the terrorists are coming any minute because they're monsters and they just hate our freedom and wanted to kill all of us because they don't like freedom. And that mindset is a manipulation that's used by colonial powers to justify war and genocide and occupation again and again and again by several different countries. And I know that was used before 9/11. This is just my memory. But I'm aware that I'm sure much older people could be like, oh yeah, that also happened in the 80s. That also happened in the 40s. That also happened in the 60s. And they could point to all these different events where they used that fear and trauma to manipulate people. And again, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know. I'm trying to think of something hopeful to say. I guess all I could say is keep learning, keep reading, keep listening, keep an open mind. Don't forget about Palestine. This is awful what's going on. This is historic awful. And let me know if you know any ways to get through these perspectives. And I'm sorry, I feel like this podcast was kind of a bummer today. And so that's just how it is. Go read my new Substack. That one's also kind of a bummer, but it's I think it's more hopeful than this podcast episode. So go read that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see y'all next week. Maybe next week will be a little bit more hopeful. You never know. All I'll say is perhaps it'll be more hopeful. Roll credits.